The warning sirens began at 600 hours, piercing through the morning calm of Earth's orbital defense stations. Captain Daewon Park stood on the bridge of the EDF flagship Indomitable, watching the displays with growing concern. The sensors had picked up something massive at the edge of the solar system, beyond Neptune's orbit. Something that wasn't supposed to be there. How many? Daewon asked his tactical officer, Lieutenant Jae-hee Kim, who was furiously typing commands into her console, counting 300. No, 400 distinct signatures, sir. They're big, bigger than anything we've ever built. Jae-hee's voice remained steady, but her hands trembled slightly. Within the hour, every military installation from Earth to Mars went on high alert. Admiral Hai-Jin Choi, the Supreme Commander of Earth's military forces, called an emergency meeting at the Geneva Command Center. World leaders appeared on screens, their faces showing various degrees of panic and confusion. Humanity had spent 2 centuries colonizing the solar system, building cities on Mars, mining operations on the asteroids and research stations on the moons of Jupiter. But they had always been alone, until now. "We're receiving a transmission," said Dr. Sung-Min Lee, the chief xenobiologist who had spent his career preparing for a moment he never truly believed would come. "It's translating itself somehow. They must be using some kind of universal mathematics." The message played across every screen, every radio, every communication device in the solar system. A deep, resonant voice spoke in perfect English, then repeated in Mandarin, Hindi, Spanish, and every other major language. "Humans of the third planet, we are the Vrex Dominion. We have ruled 200 star systems for 3,000 of your years. We have brought 47 species into our empire. You are the 48th. Surrender your military forces. Submit to our governance. You have 72 hours to comply. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your species." Silence followed. Then chaos erupted in the command center. "They can't be serious," one politician stammered. "We need to negotiate. Find out what they want." "What they want is obvious," Admiral Hai-Jin said coldly. She was a woman who had risen through the ranks during the Mars colony wars, back when humans fought each other over resources. "They want us to kneel." Daewon watched the alien fleet on his displays. They were advancing slowly, deliberately. The formation was perfect, practiced. These were conquerors who had done this many times before. His crew looked to him for guidance, and he could see the fear in their eyes. "What do we do, Captain?" Jae-hee asked quietly. Before Daewon could answer, another message came through. This time it was a direct link from Admiral Hai-Jin to all military commanders. "Activate Protocol Crimson. Authorization Hai-Jin Alpha 7. All units prepare for full deployment." This is not a drill. Daewon felt his heart rate increase. Protocol Crimson. He had heard rumors about it. Whispered conversations in officers' bars. Classified documents that disappeared from databases. Most people thought it was a myth, a contingency plan for an invasion that would never come. "Sir, are we really doing this?" Jae-hee asked. "The politicians want to negotiate." "The politicians can negotiate all they want," Daewon said. "We prepare for war." Across the solar system, hidden installations came to life. On Mars, Colonel Byung-Hoon Kang received his orders and immediately began evacuation procedures for civilians. In the asteroid belt, automated systems activated, powering up weapons platforms that had been disguised as mining equipment for decades. On Europa, defense grids emerged from beneath the ice. Dr. Sung-Min tried to establish communication with the Vrex, hoping to learn more about them, to find some common ground. The response came quickly. "We have analyzed your technology," the Vrex commander, who identified himself as High Prelate Thexus, said. "Your ships use primitive fusion drives. Your weapons are kinetic and nuclear. You have no defense against our plasma cannons or our shield technology. This will be over quickly. Surrender now, and we will allow your species to survive as laborers in our empire." Dr. Sung-Min looked at the biological data they had gathered from long-range scans of the Vrex ships. The aliens were large, heavily armored, reptilian in appearance. They had evolved on a high-gravity world, making them physically stronger than humans. Their empire had crushed dozens of civilizations. They had every reason to be confident, but they didn't know everything. Engineer Ji-Won Han sat in a classified facility beneath Seoul, watching her life's work come online. She had spent 20 years developing weapons that violated 3 different international treaties, weapons that Earth's governments had agreed to build in secret after the Mars Wars ended. The philosophy was simple. Never again would humanity be caught unprepared. If aliens existed, if they were hostile, Earth would be ready. All systems green, Jiwan reported to her superiors. The Fury array is online. Quantum missile swarms are armed. Antimatter reserves at maximum capacity. On Earth, the debate continued. Some leaders wanted to surrender, arguing that resistance was suicide. Others demanded they fight, unwilling to bow to alien masters. The argument went in circles until Admiral He Jin cut through it all. "We're not surrendering," she said flatly, "and we're not negotiating from a position of weakness. We show them what humans are capable of, and then we talk. If we roll over now, we'll be slaves forever. If we fight, at least we die free." The vote was close, but the military was already moving. Private Tai Young, barely 20 years old, stood with his unit on Mars checking his equipment for the 10th time. He had joined the military to see the solar system, to be part of something bigger than himself. He never imagined he'd be fighting aliens. "You scared?" his friend asked. "Terrified," Tai Young admitted. "But what choice do we have?" Captain Daewon received clearance to speak directly with High Prelate Thexis. The alien's face appeared on screen. A massive creature with scaled skin and yellow eyes that showed nothing but contempt. "You wish to discuss terms of surrender?" Thexis asked. "No," Daewon said. "I'm here to give you a chance to leave." Thexis made a sound that the translator interpreted as laughter. "You amuse me, human. Your entire species has fewer ships than my Vanguard fleet. What could you possibly do?" "You've conquered 47 species," Daewon said. "Have any of them ever beaten you?" "Of course not." "Then you've never learned what happens when you push too far. You've never fought someone who refuses to lose." Daewon leaned forward. "Leave now, while you still can." Thexis ended the transmission without another word. On the Vrex command ship, officers discussed the humans' audacity. Some found it entertaining. Others saw it as proof of primitive stupidity. "They don't even know what plasma weapons are," one officer said. "This will be the easiest conquest in our history." The Vrex fleet advanced, crossing the orbit of Neptune, then Uranus. They moved in perfect formation, 300 warships that had destroyed entire civilizations. Behind them came troop carriers, ready to occupy the human worlds after the military was eliminated. Admiral He Jin watched them come. She had one message for all human forces across the solar system. This is it. They think we're weak. They think we're primitive. They think this will be easy. Show them what happens when you threaten Earth. Show them what happens when you threaten our children, our homes, our future. Show them the fury of humanity unchained. The countdown began. 72 hours until the Vrex deadline. But the humans weren't waiting. The trap was set. The weapons were ready. And an empire that had never known defeat was about to learn that some prey fights back. The Vrex fleet reached Mars orbit at dawn, by the colony's clock. Colonel Byung-Hoon Kang watched from the command center, buried 3 kilometers beneath the red surface. His garrison numbered 50,000 soldiers, and they all knew what was coming. The Vrex had sent a simple message an hour before: surrender the colony or watch it burn from orbit. Byung-Hoon had sent back an even simpler message: come and take it. The Vrex opened fire first, plasma bolts streaking down toward the major population centers, but the bolts never reached their targets. Hidden defense shields flickered to life, absorbing the energy. The Vrex fired again, pouring more power into their weapons. The shields held. "Now," Byung-Hoon said quietly. From concealed silos across Mars, missiles launched. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands. They rose in swarms, twisting and weaving in patterns that seemed almost alive. The Vrex point defense systems opened up, filling space with laser fire and plasma bursts. They destroyed the first wave of missiles, then the second. But the third wave didn't follow predictable trajectories. Each missile was quantum entangled with 3 others, sharing targeting data instantaneously across any distance. When the Vrex defense grid focused on one missile, its partners adjusted. When they spread their fire wide, the missiles concentrated. The swarm adapted faster than the Vrex computers could track. 50 missiles got through, slamming into Vrex cruisers and destroyers. The explosions were spectacular, antimatter warheads releasing energy that lit up Mars like a second sun. "Impossible," High Prelate Thexis said from his command ship. "They don't have this technology. Our intelligence was clear." "Perhaps our intelligence was wrong," his second-in-command suggested. Thexus watched as 10 more Vrex ships died. Advance the main fleet. Crush them. The Vrex armada moved forward, 300 warships against Mars's defense grid. They expected overwhelming force to break human resistance within hours. Instead, the human ships revealed their true nature. What looked like civilian transports suddenly opened hidden weapon pods. Freighters deployed antimatter cannons. Mining vessels released swarms of combat drones. Captain Day-Wan brought the Indomitable screaming into the fight at full burn, his ship's fusion drive pushing harder than it should have been possible. The Vrex targeted him immediately, recognizing the human flagship. All power to forward shields, Day-Wan ordered. Prepare the hammer. Sir, the hammer isn't tested, Lieutenant Jae-hee protested. We don't know if it'll work. Then we're about to find out. The hammer was Engineer Ji-won Han's favorite project. A focused antimatter beam that could cut through nearly anything, but required so much power that the ship had to divert energy from life support to use it. The Indomitable shook as the weapon fired, and a lance of pure destruction connected with a Vrex battlecruiser. The alien ship's shields held for 3 seconds. Then they failed, and the beam carved through armor like it wasn't there. The Vrex fleet recoiled. They had lost 15% of their vanguard in less than an hour. This wasn't supposed to happen. Conquered species didn't have weapons like this. They didn't fight with this kind of coordination. They're regrouping, Jae-hee reported, falling back to regroup at the edge of engagement range. Don't let them think, Day-Wan said. Press the attack. But Byung-hoon had another surprise ready. Throughout the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, human engineers had spent decades installing gravity generators disguised as research equipment. These weren't shields or weapons. They were something far more devious. Engineer Ji-won activated the Fury array from her bunker on Earth. Across millions of kilometers of space, gravitational wells appeared and disappeared in carefully calculated patterns. Vrex ships suddenly found themselves pulled off course. Navigation systems went haywire. 2 battleships collided, their hulls tearing open. Others were flung into trajectories that would take weeks to correct. A Vrex destroyer lost its orientation completely and tumbled into the sun's gravity well, unable to escape. What is this? Thexus roared. What are they doing? His science officer stammered. They're manipulating gravity itself, Prelate. This is technology we've only theorized about. On Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, Private Tai-Yang-o crouched in a defensive position with his squad. The Vrex had sent ground forces, deciding that if they couldn't easily destroy the colonies from orbit, they'd land and take them by force. Dropships descended through Europa's thin atmosphere, carrying Vrex shock troops that stood 3 meters tall and wore powered armor. The first wave hit the human defensive lines like a hammer. Vrex soldiers were stronger, better armored, and had weapons that could melt through concrete. They should have overrun the human positions in minutes. Instead, they ran into soldiers who refused to die. Tae-yang watched his sergeant take 3 plasma bolts and keep fighting. The man's armor was half melted, but he kept shooting, kept advancing. When his rifle ran out of ammunition, he drew a blade and charged. Other humans did the same. They used the ice terrain to their advantage, collapsing tunnels on Vrex troops using the low gravity to leap over enemy positions. The Vrex had fought many species, but they'd never fought anyone like this. Species that were conquered usually surrendered when casualties reached 20%. Humans seemed to fight harder as their losses mounted. When a position became untenable, they didn't retreat. They rigged it with explosives and took their enemies with them. Tae-Yang's squad held their outpost for 18 hours straight. No sleep, no relief, just constant combat. When reinforcements finally arrived, only 6 of the original 20 soldiers were still alive. Tae-Yang was covered in blood, some his own, most not. He looked at the Vrex bodies scattered across the ice and felt nothing but grim satisfaction. They just kept coming, he told the medic who was treating his wounds. But so did we. Dr. Sung-min examined captured Vrex soldiers and equipment, trying to understand their enemy better. What he found was both encouraging and terrifying. The Vrex were formidable warriors, but they fought like they'd never faced real resistance. Their tactics assumed the enemy would break, would surrender, would see the futility of fighting. They've won for so long, they've forgotten how to deal with someone who won't quit, Dr. Sungmin reported to Admiral Hyejin. Every species they've conquered probably fought for a while, then gave up when they realized they couldn't win. We're not doing that. No, Hyejin agreed. We're not. The first battle for Mars lasted 3 days. When it finally ended, The Vrex had pulled back, having lost 90 ships and thousands of soldiers. They'd captured nothing. The human colonies were intact, damaged but functional. And the humans had learned something vital. The Vrex could bleed. Thexus sat in his command chamber, staring at casualty reports. This single battle had cost him more losses than the last 5 conquests combined. He'd expected to lose perhaps 10 ships taking the entire solar system. He'd lost 9 times that just at Mars. Send for the reserve fleet, he ordered. All of it. Prelate, that's 600 additional ships. The Council will question why we need such force against a primitive species. The humans are not primitive, Thexus said coldly. They're dangerous, and we will need every ship we have to crush them. Back on the Indomitable, Daewon addressed his exhausted crew. They'd won the first engagement, but everyone knew this was just the beginning. They'll come back harder, he said. Stronger. With more ships, more weapons. They'll throw everything they have at us. What do we do, Captain? Someone asked. Daewon smiled, though there was no humor in it. We show them that we can get stronger too. We show them that humans don't quit just because the odds are bad. We show them what we're really capable of. Lieutenant Jahe pulled up new intelligence reports. Sir, we're detecting a much larger Vrex fleet en route. It'll be here in 4 days. 4 days, Daewon repeated. Then we have 4 days to prepare. Get me Engineer Jiwan. If we have any more surprises hidden away, now's the time to deploy them. Across the solar system, humans prepared for the next battle. They'd bloodied the Virex nose, but the real war was just beginning. And both sides were starting to understand something important. This wouldn't be a quick conquest or an easy victory. This would be a fight to the bitter end. Commander Su Jin Yoon sat in the cramped command chair of her stealth frigate, the Shadow Knife. Around her, 23 identical ships drifted in the darkness beyond Jupiter's orbit, their hulls coated with metamaterials that bent light and radar around them, like water flowing around rocks. They'd been waiting here for 2 days, watching the massive Vrex reinforcement fleet arrive. 600 new ships. The Vrex were taking humanity seriously now, and that made them dangerous in a different way. Desperate enemies could be unpredictable. Distance to the nearest target? Sujin asked her pilot quietly. Even though their communications were encrypted and untraceable, everyone on the stealth ship spoke softly, as if afraid of being heard across the vacuum. 15 kilometers. We can reach them in 3 minutes at silent approach speed. Sujin nodded. The plan was insane, which meant Admiral He-jin had probably designed it herself. Each stealth frigate carried a dozen Hellfire beacons, devices no bigger than a backpack but capable of turning a ship's reactor into a bomb. They just had to get close enough to attach them. All ships, this is Shadow Lead. Begin approach. Silent protocols. If they detect you, abort and scatter. 24 ships began moving through the Vrex fleet like ghosts. The alien vessels were huge, some of them over 2 kilometers long, bristling with weapons and sensors. But their sensors were designed to detect ships that were trying to avoid being hit, not ships that were trying to disappear completely. The stealth technology had been developed during the Mars colony wars when human factions fought each other, and it had been refined for decades since. Sujin's ship glided beneath a Vrex dreadnought, so close that she could see the individual panels on its hull through the external cameras. A small drone detached from her frigate, crawled across the gap and magnetically locked onto the Vrex ship's hull near what their intelligence suggested was the reactor section. The drone planted its beacon and scurried away. Across the fleet, 40 beacons attached themselves to 40 different ships. The drones returned. The stealth frigates retreated to a safe distance. All beacons planted and armed. Sujin reported to command. Ready for detonation on your mark. Confirmed, Shadow Lead, stand by. The waiting was worse than the approach. Sujin watched the Vrex fleet organizing itself, moving into formation for their assault on Earth. They had no idea what was about to happen. Part of her almost felt sorry for them. Almost. All units, this is Admiral He-jin. Detonate beacons. Show them the price of invading our home. Sujin pressed the button. 40 Vrex warships exploded simultaneously, not from external weapons but from their own reactors overloading and going critical. The explosions were massive, each one releasing enough energy to level a city. Ships near the initial detonations were caught in the blasts, their shields overwhelmed. Secondary explosions rippled through the fleet as ammunition depots cooked off and fuel lines ruptured. When it was over, 73 Vrex ships were gone. Just gone. Erased from existence in the span of 30 seconds. High Prelate Thexus stared at the tactical display in disbelief.
How?
Our sensors detected nothing. Stealth ships, his tactical officer said, his voice shaking. They must have stealth ships. Technology we can't detect. Impossible. We would have seen evidence of such technology in their fleet actions. Perhaps they saved it for this moment, Prelate. On Europa, Captain Minho Choi was dealing with a different kind of problem. The Vrex had landed a full division of ground troops, 30,000 soldiers in powered armor. They were grinding through the human defenses with overwhelming force, and Minho's troops were running out of ammunition and options. Fall back to the secondary line, he ordered. Collapse tunnels Alpha through Gamma as you go. The humans retreated through Europa's ice tunnels, planting charges as they went. When the Vrex followed, pursuing what they thought was a beaten enemy, the charges blew. Thousands of tons of ice collapsed, burying Vrex soldiers or crushing them against tunnel walls. But it wasn't enough. The Vrex had numbers and power. Minho looked at the tactical map and made a decision. Breach Protocol Delta. Open the ice to the ocean. His second-in-command looked at him in horror. Sir, that will flood the entire sector. Our people are still in there. I know. Send the evacuation signal. Everyone has 2 minutes to reach safe zones. Europa's surface was ice, but beneath that ice was an ocean of liquid water kept warm by tidal forces from Jupiter. Minho had studied the moon's geology for years, and he knew exactly where the ice was thinnest. The charges blew, and suddenly the Virex troops found themselves standing on ice that was cracking beneath their feet. The ocean came rushing up, water under immense pressure. Vrex soldiers in their heavy armor sank like stones. Some tried to use their jets to escape, but the water pulled them down. Within minutes, 3,000 enemy soldiers were gone, drowned in an alien ocean. It was brutal. It was desperate. And it worked. Dr. Kyung-Suk Baek, a military psychologist, was studying combat footage from all the engagements. What she saw fascinated and horrified her. Humans were performing at levels that should have been impossible. Soldiers fought for days without sleep. Wounded troops refused medical evacuation. Units that should have broken under pressure instead charged forward. It's the threat to home, she explained to Admiral Hai-Jin in her report. Humans evolved as persistence hunters and tribal defenders. We're biologically programmed to keep fighting when our territory is threatened. The Vrex have never encountered a species like us because most species are more sensible. They know when to quit. We don't. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Hai-Jin asked. Both. It means we can win battles we shouldn't be able to win. But it also means we might not stop even when we should. Hai-Jin considered this. Then she made another controversial decision. Activate Berserker protocols. Distribute the combat stims to all frontline units. Berserker protocols involved a cocktail of drugs and neural stimulants that pushed soldiers beyond their normal limits. Pain response decreased. Aggression increased. Fatigue became a distant concept. The effects lasted for hours, followed by a crash that could be devastating. But in combat, those hours could mean the difference between victory and death. Private Tae Yang, received his berserker dose before the next Vrex assault on Europa. He felt the chemicals hit his system, felt his heart rate increase and his senses sharpen. The fear he'd been carrying since the war began didn't disappear, but it became distant, manageable. What replaced it was a cold, burning determination. When the Vrex came again, they found humans who didn't retreat, didn't hesitate, didn't show mercy. Tae Yang and his squad hit the enemy line like a hammer. They fought with a ferocity that shocked even their own officers. Vrex soldiers, bred for war on a high-gravity world, found themselves being pushed back by smaller, weaker enemies who simply refused to stop. The fighting became increasingly brutal. Human soldiers started boarding Vrex ships not to capture them, but to sabotage them from inside. They'd cut through hulls, plant explosives in critical systems, and escape if they could. If they couldn't escape, they'd set off the explosives anyway, taking themselves and part of the ship with them. The Vrex had a word in their language that translated roughly to reasonable combat. It meant fighting within certain understood limits, with the understanding that surrender was always an option. Humans didn't seem to have that concept. They fought like every battle was their last, like survival of their entire species depended on this one moment. Lieutenant Jae Hee discovered something crucial while analyzing Vrex communications. She brought it to Captain Daewon immediately. Sir, I've located their command ship, the vessel where High Prelate Thexus is coordinating the invasion. Daewon leaned forward.
Where?
It's staying at the back of their fleet, protected by their best ships. But I think we can reach it. How? Jae-hee smiled. The same way Commander Soo-jin did. We load a ship with antimatter, make it look like it's trying to break through their lines, and when they focus all their attention on stopping it, we hit them from a different angle. Daewon finished. It's risky. Everything we're doing is risky, sir. Daewon thought about it. Taking out the Vrex command structure wouldn't end the war, but it would hurt them badly. It might even make them consider retreat. Prepare the plan. I'm going to volunteer for the strike. Sir, you're the fleet commander.
You can't. I can and I will.
Get it ready. Across the solar system, the war ground on. Humans held Mars, defended the asteroid belt, protected Earth. The Vrex kept pushing, kept attacking, but their advance had stalled. What should have been a quick conquest had turned into a brutal stalemate. And slowly, Thexus began to understand what Dr. Sungmin had discovered. This wasn't just resistance. This wasn't just a military defending its territory. This was rage. This was fury. This was a species that had been fighting itself for thousands of years, suddenly unified against an outside threat. The Vrex had expected resistance. What they found was something they'd never encountered in 3,000 years of conquest. They found humanity unchained, unleashed and unwilling to stop until every last invader was dead or driven from their home. The plan was simple in concept but insane in execution. Captain Daewon stood on the bridge of what appeared to be the Indomitable, surrounded by a fleet of 50 ships, all charging straight into the heart of the Vrex Armada. 1,000 alien warships waited ahead, their weapons trained on the approaching humans. It looked like a suicide attack, and the Vrex were happy to oblige. They're taking the bait, Lieutenant Jae-hee said from the actual Indomitable, safely positioned 3 million kilometers away. All Vrex weapons platforms are focusing on your position. Daewon, piloting a decoy ship remotely from the real flagship, smiled. Good, let them think we've lost our minds. General Wu Jin, are your forces ready? Ready and waiting, Captain, came the reply from Earth. Just give us the signal. The Vrex opened fire with everything they had. Plasma bolts, missiles, energy beams, all converging on the human fleet. The ship's shields held for a few seconds, then began to fail. One ship exploded, then another. The Vrex commanders watched with satisfaction as the human forces were systematically destroyed. What they didn't know was that every ship was automated and remotely controlled, and each one was packed with enough antimatter to destroy a small moon. Now, Daewon said quietly. The 50 ships detonated simultaneously, creating a wall of destruction that tore through the Vrex formation. The explosions were so bright that sensors across the solar system had to adjust. When the light faded, 200 Vrex ships were gone. Just erased from existence, but that wasn't the real attack. From beyond Neptune's orbit, Admiral Dong Hyun-im led what humanity called the Ghost Fleet. These ships had been built in secret over decades, constructed in hidden shipyards in the Kuiper Belt and powered down to avoid detection. The Vrex had never known they existed. 500 human warships, each one equipped with the latest weapons technology, each one crewed by veterans who'd been training for this moment. They hit the Vrex fleet from behind, from above, from below, hit them while the aliens were still reeling from the antimatter detonations, while their formation was scattered and their command structure was trying to reorganize. Admiral Dong Hyun had waited his entire career for this. He'd spent 30 years in the outer system, preparing for an invasion that everyone said would never come. Now he proved that every year, every resource, every sacrifice had been worth it. All ships fire at will. Target their capital ships first. Break their spine. The battle that followed was chaos. The Vrex had superior numbers, but the humans had surprise, better positioning, and weapons the aliens couldn't counter. Specialist Youngmi Park, a cyber warfare expert working from a bunker on Earth's moon, proved to be one of the most valuable assets in the entire battle. She'd been studying captured Vrex computer systems for weeks, looking for weaknesses. What she found was that the Vrex used a centralized communication network that assumed it could never be breached. It was sophisticated but inflexible. Once Youngmi found the access codes, she owned their entire system. I'm in, she reported to Admiral Hai-jin. I have control of their fleet communications. What can you do with it? Watch this. Youngmi sent false orders across the Vrex network. Ships were told to move to positions that put them in their own firing lines. Squadrons received contradictory commands. Support vessels were ordered to retreat, while assault ships were told to advance without backup. The Vrex fleet, so perfectly organized before, began to fragment. Commanders tried to override the false orders, but young Mi was faster. Every time they adapted, she changed tactics. She sent medical alerts that weren't real, supply requests that couldn't be fulfilled, casualty reports that weren't accurate. She turned their own communication system into a weapon against them. General Wu Jin coordinated the system-wide counteroffensive from Earth. Every human colony, every station, every ship attacked simultaneously. It was a strategy that shouldn't have worked against a numerically superior enemy, but it created the illusion of an even larger human force. The Vrex couldn't tell where the real threats were coming from. On Mars, Colonel Byung-hoon led his forces in a breakout attack, hitting Vrex positions that had been besieging the colony. On Europa, Captain Minho's troops emerged from their tunnels and struck at the landing zones where Vrex reinforcements were arriving. On the asteroid belt mining stations, workers who'd been trained as militia activated hidden weapons and destroyed Vrex supply ships. Humanity unveiled its most terrifying weapon at this moment. Engineer Ji-won activated the Ragnarok device, technology that was technically illegal by every treaty Earth had ever signed. It was an artificial black hole generator, capable of creating micro-singularities that lasted just long enough to destroy everything nearby before evaporating. 3 Vrex supercarriers, each one capable of destroying a planet, found themselves targeted by these weapons. The singularities appeared near their hulls, and the massive ships were simply consumed. Pulled into impossible gravity wells, crushed into nothing, gone before they could even send distress signals. The Virax fleet broke, not retreated, not withdrew, broke. Ships fled in every direction, abandoning formation, abandoning their mission, abandoning each other. High Prelate Thexus watched his empire's invincible armada turn into a scattered mob of terrified survivors. "This is impossible," he kept saying. "This doesn't happen. This has never happened." His second-in-command was trying to organize a retreat, but half the fleet wasn't responding to orders anymore. Some ships were still under Young Mi's control. Others had lost communication entirely. A few fought on, but they were islands in a sea of chaos. Captain Daewon, now back in command of the real Indomitable, intercepted the Vrex flagship. The massive alien command ship tried to run, but Daewon's ship was faster and more maneuverable. He didn't destroy it. Instead, he disabled its engines with precise shots, leaving it dead in space. "Open a channel to Thexus," Daewon ordered. The Virax commander's face appeared on screen. He looked nothing like the confident conqueror who had arrived weeks ago. He looked defeated, exhausted, and terrified. "Why?" Thexus asked. "Why are you doing this? We offered you a place in our empire. We offered you survival. As slaves," Daewon said. "You came to our home and demanded we kneel. Did you really think we'd just accept that? Every other species did eventually. Why not you? Because we're human. Because we'd rather die free than live as your property. Because you made a mistake." Daewon leaned forward. "You wanted to see what humans are capable of? Look around you. This is what we're capable of, and this is just us defending ourselves. Imagine what we could do if we decided to attack." Thexus watched through his ship's sensors as human forces systematically destroyed the remaining Vrex ships that refused to surrender. The battle had turned into an execution. "You wanted to conquer us in 3 days, Daewon continued. You've been fighting us for 3 weeks and you're losing. You've lost 80% of your invasion force. Your empire's reputation for invincibility is destroyed. And you know the worst part? We're just getting started. What do you want?" Thexus asked quietly. "Right now, I want you to watch. I want you to see what happens when you threaten Earth. I want you to remember this moment. And when we finally let you go, I want you to tell every species in your empire what happened here." The battle ended not with a climactic final confrontation, but with a whimper. The Vrex forces that could run did run. Those that couldn't surrendered. High Prelate Thexus, the conqueror who had never known defeat, sat in his disabled command ship and watched his fleet die. Admiral He-jin surveyed the battlefield from Earth. The cost had been high. Thousands of human soldiers dead, multiple colonies damaged. But they'd won. Against impossible odds, with inferior numbers, humanity had defeated an empire that had conquered 47 other species. "What now?" General Wu Jin asked. Hyejin thought about it. The Vrex were beaten, but they weren't destroyed. Their empire still existed, still controlled 200 star systems. If humanity just let them leave, they might regroup and come back stronger. We chase them, she decided. We don't let them think this is over. We show them that Earth doesn't just defend. We hunt. Private Taeyang, still alive despite everything, sat with his surviving squad members on Europa. They'd held the line. They'd fought impossible battles and won. And now they were watching on screens as the Vrex fleet fled the solar system. Is it over? Someone asked. Taeyang thought about the orders that were already coming down. Pursuit fleets being organized. Humanity wasn't going to stay in the solar system anymore. They were going out into the galaxy to make sure the Vrex never came back. No, he said. It's just beginning. High Prelate Thexus and his surviving ships limped back toward Vrex space, their hulls scarred and their crews shattered. Of the 1,000 warships that had entered human territory, fewer than 200 remained functional. The rest were debris floating in the void, monuments to the Empire's greatest defeat. But the nightmare wasn't over. Commander Yoonji Lim followed them. Her pursuit fleet consisted of 100 ships, all of them fast and heavily armed. Admiral Hyejin's orders had been clear. Don't let them forget what happened. Don't let them think they can ever try this again. Target their slowest ships, Yoonji ordered. Fire one warning shot. If they don't surrender, destroy them. The Vrex were too damaged and demoralized to fight back. Ships surrendered one by one, their crews taken prisoner or transferred to other vessels. Yoonji wasn't trying to conquer. She was sending a message. Humanity could reach anywhere the Vrex could go. For 20 light years, the pursuit continued. Every time the Vrex tried to stop and regroup, human ships appeared and scattered them again. Thexus realized with growing horror that the humans weren't just defending their territory anymore. They were hunting. Please, Thexus transmitted to the pursuing fleet. We're leaving. We acknowledge defeat. What more do you want? Yoonji responded coldly. We want to make sure you understand that Earth isn't just another conquest you failed. We want you to remember this lesson forever. News of the Vrex defeat spread across the galaxy faster than their retreating ships. The Galactic Council, a coalition of species that had either been conquered by the Vrex or lived in fear of them, held an emergency session. Representatives from 40 species gathered, all of them trying to understand what had happened. The Vrex Empire has existed for 3,000 years, one delegate said. They've never lost a war, never even lost a major battle. And now a single primitive species has destroyed most of their invasion force. Perhaps they're not as primitive as the Vrex believed, another suggested. Ambassador Jungi Nam arrived at the Galactic Council 3 months after the invasion ended. He was humanity's first official representative to the wider galaxy, and he came with a fleet of 30 warships as escort, not as a threat but as a statement. Humanity was here and they weren't hiding anymore. The council chamber fell silent when Jungi entered. The ambassador was a small man by human standards, but he carried himself with quiet confidence. Behind him stood Captain Daewon and Lieutenant Jae-hee, both in full military dress uniforms. Honored delegates. Jungi began. I come representing the people of Earth. We didn't ask for this war. We didn't want it. But the Vrex came to our home and demanded our surrender. What would you have done? We would have surrendered, one delegate admitted quietly. The Vrex cannot be defeated. They can, Jungi said. They were. And here are our terms for peace. He presented the demands humanity had prepared. Complete withdrawal of all Vrex forces from human space, extending 100 light years in all directions. Reparations for damages caused during the invasion. Full technology sharing. So humanity could better understand the galaxy they now found themselves part of. And most importantly, a guarantee that the Vrex would never threaten Earth again. These terms are harsh, a Vrex representative protested. You're humiliating an empire that has stood for millennia. You tried to enslave us, Daewon said flatly. These terms are generous. Be grateful we're letting you survive as an empire at all. The Vrex, broken and desperate, agreed to everything. The treaty was signed within a week. The empire that had ruled 200 star systems for 3,000 years officially acknowledged defeat at the hands of a species that had never left its own solar system before. Dr. Sungmin spent months meeting with representatives from other species, sharing information and learning about the galaxy. What he discovered explained a lot about why humanity had won. Most species in the galaxy evolved on relatively peaceful worlds, he explained to Admiral Hyejin in his report. They had some predators, some competition, but nothing like Earth. They never developed the same level of aggression, the same willingness to fight despite overwhelming odds. And the Vreks? Hyejin asked. The Vreks evolved on a harsh world which made them strong and disciplined, but their empire conquered species without much resistance, so they forgot how to deal with an enemy that refuses to quit. They've been fighting farmers, not warriors. One alien diplomat put it more bluntly in a private conversation with Jungi. You fought the Vreks to a standstill in weeks. It took my species decades to lose to them.
What are you?
Human, Jungi replied simply. We've been fighting each other since before we discovered fire. Every advance in our civilization has been matched by advances in how we wage war. When you threatened our survival, you gave us a common enemy, and when humans unite against a threat, we become something else entirely. Historian Chulsu Han was given the task of documenting the war for future generations. He interviewed soldiers, officers, engineers, and civilians. The stories he collected were remarkable. Tales of courage, sacrifice, innovation, and determination, but also stories of horror, loss, and the terrible cost of survival. We won, Chulsu wrote in his final chapter, but victory came with a price. We showed the galaxy what humans can do when pushed to the edge. The question now is, what do we do with that reputation? Admiral Hyejin made the decision to create the Outer Defense Initiative, a permanent military presence beyond the solar system. Humanity would no longer wait for threats to arrive. They would watch, patrol, and be ready. Captain Daewon took command of this new force, establishing bases in nearby star systems and making sure everyone knew that Earth was protected. Private Tai Yang O, now promoted to sergeant, joined one of these outposts. He'd survived the war, though many of his friends hadn't. He sometimes wondered if he'd done the right thing fighting with such fury and hatred. But then he'd remember why they fought: for survival, for freedom, for the right to exist without masters. Commander Sujin's stealth fleet became humanity's intelligence service, quietly monitoring the Virex Empire and other potential threats. Engineer Ji-won continued developing new weapons, though she hoped they'd never be needed. Dr. Kyung-suk studied the psychological effects of the war, helping soldiers deal with trauma while understanding what had made them so effective in combat. 6 months after the war ended, humanity sent its final message to the galaxy. Jungi delivered it personally to the Galactic Council, and it was broadcast across every known communication channel. People of the galaxy, the message began. We are humanity from the planet Earth. We didn't want this war. We wanted peace, trade, friendship. But the Vreks brought war to our doorstep, and we responded the only way we could. We fought, we bled, and we won. Now you know what we're capable of. You know that we can defend ourselves, that we can fight back, that we won't surrender no matter the odds. But we want you to know something else. We don't want to be your enemy. We want to be your neighbors, your partners, maybe even your friends. But if you bring war to our home again, if you threaten our children, our families, our future, you won't face resistance. You'll face something far worse. You'll face rage. You'll face fury. You'll face humans unchained, unleashed, and unwilling to stop until the threat is eliminated. Choose wisely how you approach us. Come in peace and we'll welcome you. Come in war and you'll learn why the Vrex Empire, after 3,000 years of conquest, ran away from a single solar system. The message ended. The galaxy listened, and the species that heard it had to make their own choices about how to interact with these strange, violent, determined creatures called humans. Captain Daewon stood on the observation deck of his new flagship watching the stars. Somewhere out there the Vreks were rebuilding, though they'd never be the same empire they were before. Somewhere else other species were deciding whether humanity was a threat or an opportunity. Lieutenant Jae-hee joined him. Do you think they'll leave us alone now? Some will, Daewon said. Others won't be able to resist testing us. Humans aren't the only species that can be stupid and aggressive. Then we'll be ready. Always. On Earth, life slowly returned to normal. The cities rebuilt. The losses were mourned. Children grew up hearing stories about the war, about the humans who defended their world against impossible odds. Some were inspired to join the military. Others became engineers, scientists, diplomats hoping to build a better future. High Prelate Thexus, stripped of his rank and exiled to a remote Vrex colony, spent his remaining years writing. His memoir became famous across the galaxy, required reading for any military officer. The final chapter was titled simply, The Humans. In it he wrote, "We studied them for months before we attacked. We knew their technology, their tactics, their capabilities, or we thought we did. What we didn't understand was their nature. When we fight, we calculate acceptable losses and strategic withdrawals. When humans fight, they forget how to lose. They don't have the strongest ships or the best weapons. They don't have the largest population or the most resources. What they have is something we can't measure or counter, the absolute refusal to give up. Ever. If you're reading this, you're probably considering conflict with humanity.